So this is really the part where you kind of have to part ways, so to speak, with the current mesh, because there is definitely a more advanced way of fixing this, but I'm gonna show you a way that's more approachable and understandable as a beginner. So we're going to look at the blueprint that we've got. We can select it over here. We've got to select it. We can right click and browse to asset. And then we can actually duplicate that and say BP mesh generator floor as an example. And instead we can actually delete this now and add this one. Make sure that it's centered. And now we can load up the mesh. So we'll have to go back into where we have in the mega scans where we've got that particular mesh that we were going to use. And that was over Roman stone floor. Yeah, no, not that one. I keep forgetting where this is. So clay vase, no. Roman arch, Roman trim. Yeah, there we go. Street cobblestone. So we can add that in there. And we're obviously going to have the same sort of problem. I'm going to offset this by about 80 or something. And now I'm also going to click on the spline and then just increase it so we can add something in there. And I think that offset is way too big, so we can probably do now 50, 100, 10, 0, 0.1. It's very odd. It's the bounding box really that's not allowing me to push these as I want, but we can fix that, that's fine. But they're still not rotated in the direction that we want. So the reason why we created a different blueprint is because we're actually going to browse it, we're going to open it, and then over in here in the construction script where we've laid out the logic, we have this rotation, and we could put that to 90 degrees and compile. And now, as you can see, they're actually going quite nice, right? And we're gonna have to minus, maybe like a -10 or something, but you can still see where they're coming together because these are not necessarily trim meshes. So it's a bit of an annoyance, to be honest, because you can't really get them together without being able to see this seam, unfortunately. We'll be able to cover it in because we're doing a cinematic, but if you do this on a, you know, like an actual sort of mesh, you know, for a game or something, this would be quite visible here. So we would need to find a better sort of transition for this, because at no point could you sort of connect these seamlessly, as you can see in here, right? But anyway, also, by the way, this material has got quite a bit of height. If I double click it, and if I go into the material itself and then open the material, this is how you do that. I do actually have in this function for the mega scan, I do have a displacement. So I'm using this texture, which is something that comes with a cobblestone. So you can actually click this button to see it. These are all the textures for the cobblestone. That's in the folder where we've got the cobblestone. So the sort of the R channel, the red channel of this texture, I've used that in the displacement in here. But you're not going to be able to see this unless you activate tessellation in Unreal Engine 5.3. And that's another tutorial. To be honest, I could show you this, how to do it, but it's probably a bit too advanced for what we're trying to do here. And effectively, it just adds a bit more tessellation effect on this particular mesh to make it look a bit more detailed. But yeah, we'll check it. That's outside the engine. We're gonna have to do that outside the engine in order to get it to run. But now we've got this, and it's time for us to you know, increase our cobblestone. Take this further. Maybe, yeah, something like that. Okay, so we've now pretty much pushed it all the way into the scene like that, you know, something like that. And that's great. Now we have the cobblestone, but now we don't really have anything on the sides. So this is when we need to start adding something else in there. Now we can try using the same mesh like that, although I obviously wouldn't advise that you do this specifically, or you could do it like that and then just make it so that it's higher, elevated, so you give it a bit more of a structure if you'd like. But you could also be looking at adding this over here and using a different kind of mesh. So in this particular case, we will use the Roman stone floor, so this one, and we can add that in there. And now we added it in. We could have a look at doing a different size, so maybe like yeah, 2, maybe 2 is too much, 1.5, and then the spacing, maybe do the spacing at around 1, 2, or 5. Let's try 10, 20, no, 50. No, even more. We could probably go for like 100. So now we can bring these somewhere around here, like that. And then we can duplicate and rotate, and then bring it in, like something like that. And then we can move it inside. Yeah, I feel like we're gonna have to drag it in a bit, like that. And then maybe do the same thing here, where we're sort of like connecting them. And then we can put these in, select them both, bring them in like that. Maybe make them a bit bigger, 1.7 or 1.8. Yeah, something like that, okay? Now these walls, you know, the bottom walls, you can actually bring it in closer. So it sort of creates this sort of form here, like that. So we're going to do the same thing here, because we're now going to take and duplicate the same floors and bring them like that in here. Okay, so this has now created a bit more sort of a, you know, of an effect, of a different tiling on the floor. So that could be, you know, that could be something that's quite nice. Now we need to get this plane off. I'm going to push that down. And now we obviously no longer can see any whiteness or anything in between. That's looking a lot nicer. And then we can have a look and see if we can take one of these and drop it in here. But what I would do is, you know, this elevation that we've got in here where the altar is going to go, I'm going to have to change that to some other mesh. You know, like we could use these and just pepper the scene a little bit with that. And we're going to be able to do it quite nicely because we're going to increase the scale on the z-axis, which is going to help us to get a bit more diversity on the stone formations. We're now getting very close to finishing off the main assets for the scene. So we're going to keep this plane and this particular rectangular shape in here for now, but we're going to drop this cobblestone in. Now with that dropped, we can actually untick the scale and push this over to like a 2 or something like that. And then we can sort of try and eyeball some of this stuff in here. So maybe do it like that. And maybe this one is even a bit taller, 2.5. And as you can see, the z-axis scaling up, it really works quite nicely for us here. And then drag this in like that. And then we can bring this over, rotate it again like that. And again, this is going to take a bit of sort of getting used to, like this sort of workflow, because you're effectively trying to fill in a space, and that space already has some, you know, it's already filled in some particular way with a shape, and you're going to have to sort of like visualize, eyeball things. A lot of things that look good probably are going to be good if they look good, you know. Anyway, we can now select this plane and we can delete it. So this is sort of like the floor that we've got, and you'll notice that there are some issues in here. So we can rotate. You can deactivate the snapping of this and just rotate a little bit, just to get a bit of a better form there. Now, what I would do is, if you can sort of find assets in the Megascan to add in between here, like rocks and things like that, just to build up that scene more. But it really depends on whether or not your focus of this is around here. So now we've got that in place. By the way, this material, if you want it to match more with the rest of the material, you can double click the material itself, and then you do have an albedo tint in here. Let me just close off all of these, you know, all these things at the top. And now we've got this material. We can drag it out. We can have a look at the albedo tint. Now, if we change this, as you can see, the color of this changes. We do have a color picker, so we could use that. So I can select sort of like this. Now it's very dark now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start lighting it up. It's a bit of an odd one because it's not really, we're not really getting that. Let me just have a look. So it looks to me like we're going to have to eyeball things a little bit in here and desaturate them quite a bit like that. Maybe turn it a bit darker. It's also very dependent on what type of material you already had. So specular desaturation, will this help us in any, but no, actually no, not even, we didn't have any specular in there. Metallic controls, so this is gonna definitely gonna have an effect here. So let me just see. Yeah, this is still very gray, like the texture is very gray on that one, and this one not so much. Probably leaning towards the bluish, and then very, quite desaturated. Something like that. Again, not really a big fan of it. We're probably going to revise that a bit later, but let's just leave it for now. Okay, so now we've got to deal with the altar, and we've got to deal with the goblet on the altar. And also, as you saw in the cinematic, there was also a cloth part on it as well.